So many people misunderstand the no contact rule. They either weaponize it to play games, or they resist it entirely because they fear losing someone for good. But here's the truth that most people don't talk about. No contact isn't about making them suffer, it's about making you stronger. It's not a punishment, it's not some immature silent treatment. It's a powerful strategy rooted in emotional psychology and self-respect. When you go no contact, you are stepping away not to cause pain, but to create space. Emotional space, mental space, even spiritual space, and that space is necessary because in the midst of heartbreak or confusion, most people lose themselves in the noise of someone else. They get tangled in what the other person wants, what they're thinking, whether they'll come back, whether they miss you, and every bit of that noise chips away at your clarity. You start reacting, obsessing, overthinking. Suddenly, you're no longer in control of the situation, you're not even in control of yourself. What no contact does is it reclaims that control. It shifts the dynamic from chasing to centering, because let's be honest, when someone pulls away, our instinct is to pull harder. To ask questions, to beg for closure, to send one more message that'll make them see. But all of that comes from a place of emotional urgency, and when you operate from urgency, you rarely get the outcome you want. The reason no contact is so powerful is because it allows the emotional charge to settle for both people. It gives them a moment without your energy constantly reminding them that you're still waiting, that you're still attached. When someone knows you're available, when they know you're still there, it's easy for them to sit back and do nothing. They don't feel the weight of your absence. But when you go silent, really silent, they're left alone with themselves. And that's when they begin to feel what they couldn't feel before, what it's like to be without you. But here's the twist. This isn't about making them regret it. That's not the core purpose. The true value of no contact is that you get to experience your own identity again without it revolving around them. It's where you rediscover who you were before they took up so much space in your life. Your hobbies, your peace, your goals, your social circle, the version of you that wasn't checking your phone every 5 minutes hoping they'd suddenly realize your worth. You can't reconnect with that version of you if you're still in a tug-of-war with someone who's unsure. You can't rebuild your confidence while you're waiting for breadcrumbs, and you absolutely can't grow while constantly making micro adjustments to stay relevant in someone else's mind. No contact removes you from that game. It says, I'm not going to beg for a seat at your table. I'll go build my own. Now, here's where it becomes even more powerful. When you stop showing up, people start wondering where you went. But even more importantly, they start questioning why you're no longer chasing. That shift is unsettling to them because they got used to a version of you who was always available, always apologizing, always proving. So your absence becomes a mirror. It forces them to reflect. Not because you told them to, not because you sent some carefully worded text, but because you simply stopped showing up for the drama. Think about it this way. When someone walks out of a room and slams the door, people notice the noise. But when someone walks out quietly and never comes back, people feel the silence. That's what no contact is. It's not the drama of saying, you'll miss me one day. It's the quiet confidence of saying nothing at all and letting your absence speak volumes. That's how you become unforgettable, not by forcing your way back in, but by gracefully stepping back and letting your value echo in the space you leave behind. And one more thing, it's not about playing hard to get. That's a manipulation tactic. This isn't about manipulation, it's about magnetism. When you genuinely focus on your healing, when you build a life that you're proud of, when you stop waiting for their attention to feel worthy, that's when everything changes. Because your energy shifts, you start to carry yourself differently. You become less reactive, more selective, and people pick up on that. They feel when you're no longer waiting for them, and that's often the very moment they start thinking about you again. But even then, your silence should never be a strategy just to win them back. It should be a declaration, I will no longer betray my peace just to keep your attention. That's the moment you stop begging for breadcrumbs and start living like the whole damn cake. And ironically, it's often in that space, when you've let go of needing them, that they suddenly want you back, but by then, you're not the same person anymore. You're someone who's seen your own value. And now, if they want another chance, they'll have to meet you on your terms, not because you broke no contact to chase them, but because your silence made them realize they'd lost something they can't replace. The hardest thing about no contact isn't the silence, it's what the silence brings up, all the fears, the doubts, the temptation to break it just to feel some sort of connection again. You start thinking, maybe if I just send a casual message, or what if they've forgotten about me? That feeling, the emotional urgency to reach out, is exactly why most people break no contact too soon. But here's the real truth. If you're still desperate to hear from them, it's not time to reach out. People often confuse timing with opportunity. They think it's been a few weeks, maybe now is the right time. But timing isn't about the calendar. It's not about how long it's been since you last talked. It's about where you are emotionally, because if you're still checking your phone every hour, if their silence still dictates your mood, if your self-worth is still tangled up in whether they respond or not, then you're not ready. Not because you're weak, but because you're still healing, and healing demands that you don't reopen the wound just because you miss the person who caused it. The perfect time to break no contact isn't when the loneliness becomes unbearable. It's when you've made peace with it. It's when you've reached a place where you no longer need them to respond to feel validated, when you can send a message and, whether they respond or not, you're still centered. That's when you're ready, when their answer is no longer tied to your identity. Why does that matter? Because desperation always shows. No matter how composed your message sounds, no matter how casual you try to make it, people can feel your energy. If you're reaching out hoping to get something, closure, attention, reassurance, they'll sense it, and most of the time they'll either pull away or take you for granted again. But if you reach out from a place of detachment, not coldness but clarity, the energy is completely different. You're not there to chase them. You're there to communicate from a grounded, confident space, and that difference, that's what shifts the dynamic. Imagine walking into a room where the person who once begged for your time now walks with calm, with grace, with dignity. No resentment, no pleading, just peace. That's powerful, that's attractive, that's rare, and that only happens when you stop seeing them as the source of your healing and start being your own anchor. You see, most people don't want to break no contact because they've grown. They do it because they're scared. They think they're losing their chance. But fear is not a reason to reach out. Fear leads you to act prematurely. Fear whispers that you're running out of time, when in truth, the right connection doesn't expire, it evolves. And if someone is truly meant to come back into your life, they won't do it because you chased them. They'll do it because your absence made them realize your worth. Here's the real beauty in waiting. You gain perspective. When the emotional fog lifts, you start to see the situation for what it really was, not just what you hoped it could be. You stop romanticizing the moments and start recognizing the patterns. And that awareness, it changes everything, because now, when you choose to re-engage, you're not doing it blindly. You're doing it with intention, with boundaries, with self-respect. And let's not ignore this. Sometimes the right time to break no contact never comes. Sometimes you reach that place of clarity and realize, I don't actually want this anymore. That's not failure, that's growth. Because now, your decision isn't based on fear of loss, it's based on self-awareness. You're no longer acting from a place of needing someone to make you feel whole. You are whole. So how do you know if you're truly ready? You ask yourself this: if I reach out and they don't respond, will I still be okay? If the answer is yes, genuinely yes, then maybe it's time. But if there's even a trace of, I need them to say something for me to feel better, then it's not time yet, because breaking no contact shouldn't be about seeking comfort. It should be about clarity, closure, or connection, with yourself first and foremost. At the end of the day, the goal isn't to play games, it's to move with strength. It's to know that the most attractive version of you, the version that makes someone truly take notice, isn't the one who's begging to be seen. It's the one who's already standing tall, already living their life, already at peace with or without them. When you no longer need them to choose you, that's usually when they finally want to, not because you manipulated them, not because you played hard to get, but because you became someone who doesn't wait for love. You embody it. That's the moment, that's the shift, that's the perfect time. Most people underestimate how much a single message communicates, not just in words, but in tone, energy, and intent. After no contact, if and when you choose to reach out, your message is not just a string of sentences. It's your reintroduction. It reflects who you are now, not who you were when you were anxious, heartbroken, and constantly checking if they still cared. That's why it's so crucial that the message matches your new standards. You see, if you've done no contact the right way, you've changed. You've taken space to reclaim your confidence, to reconnect with your self-worth, and to stop centering someone else's inconsistency in your life. But if you come back into their life sounding like the old version of you, timid, overly accommodating, needing their validation, you undo all that progress. Worse, you reinforce the same dynamic that didn't serve you in the first place. The message you send needs to reflect your evolution. It needs to carry the energy of someone who values themselves, someone who is emotionally grounded, someone who isn't trying to convince anyone of their worth. That doesn't mean being cold. It doesn't mean being passive, aggressive. In fact, some people mistake strength for bluntness or sarcasm. But true strength is quiet confidence. It's grace. It's the tone of someone who knows they don't have to fight to be chosen. They only need to be themselves and let the right person recognize that. Let's talk practically. What does a message that reflects new standards actually look like? It's brief, it's sincere, it doesn't over-explain, it's not trying to resurrect the past or force a reaction. It simply says, I'm good, I've grown, and I'm open to connection, but only the kind that respects where I am now. You're not sending a message to open old wounds. You're sending it to open a new chapter, if it makes sense. You're not writing a novel about everything you've been through in their absence. You're not listing reasons why they should have treated you better. You're not asking, do you miss me, or have you thought about me? Because those kinds of questions come from a place of lack, and lack is the energy of the old you. The new you is abundant. The new you knows your life is already full. You're not messaging to be chosen. You're offering an invitation, and you're just as okay if it's declined. This is the difference between reaching out from confidence and reaching out from craving. One says, I'm enough as I am, and I'm curious to see what's here. The other says, I'm not enough unless you respond. That difference will be felt every time. It's important to also remember this. Your message should align with the emotional boundaries you've built. If they've previously crossed lines, ghosted you, manipulated you, played hot and cold, you don't just go back in pretending those things didn't happen. You don't have to rehash the past, but your energy should communicate, I'm no longer the person who will tolerate that. That means being slower to offer access, not because you're punishing them, but because you now protect your peace. When your standards have changed, your communication changes too. You don't rush to make plans. You don't ask questions that make it easy for them to give you breadcrumb answers. You don't pour out vulnerability without first checking if they're even capable of holding it. You understand that access to your heart is something that gets earned now, not assumed. The irony is, when your message reflects that kind of energy, the response you get is usually completely different than before, because now they can feel the shift. You're no longer trying to impress them. You're not selling your value, you're living it, and that's powerful. People aren't drawn to desperation, they're drawn to direction. When someone senses that you're not writing from the same emotional dependency, they treat you differently. They either step up or step out, and either way you win, because you're no longer begging for clarity. You are the clarity. Let's go even deeper here. Sometimes the first message isn't even necessary. Sometimes just existing in that energy, moving forward, leveling up, being seen in your glow, creates the magnetism that brings them back to you. And if they do reach out first, your response still needs to mirror your standards. Don't fall into the trap of dropping all your boundaries just because they've shown interest again. That's how old patterns return. The way you speak, the way you reply, the way you pace the conversation. It should all align with your evolved self. Ultimately, your words are an extension of your values. If you value peace, don't send messages that create chaos. If you value honesty, don't play games. If you value growth, don't pretend to be someone you're not. Just be the version of yourself that knows what she brings to the table. And if they're ready for that version of you, they'll show up differently. If they're not, that's okay too, because you're no longer here to prove yourself to someone who couldn't see your worth the first time. You've raised your standards. Make sure your message doesn't lower them just to reconnect with someone who still hasn't risen to meet them. The most powerful transformation isn't the one you announce, it's the one they sense. It's not what you say, it's what they feel. You can send paragraphs explaining how much you've changed, how you've grown, how you're not the same person who begged them to stay, but none of that will matter if your energy hasn't actually shifted. True growth doesn't need to be declared, it's felt. This is where so many people get it wrong. After no contact, they come back trying to explain themselves, trying to prove how evolved they've become. They write long texts or have emotional conversations trying to get the other person to see the difference. But here's the truth. If you really changed, they'll already feel the difference. You won't need to explain it. In fact, the more you try to prove it, the more it sounds like you haven't changed at all. The old you might have tried to fix everything. You may have overcompensated, over-apologized, over-explained. You may have fought to be understood. That version of you was still attached to their perception, still obsessed with what they thought of you, still trying to win their approval. But the evolved you doesn't fight to be understood. You let your actions, your boundaries, your presence speak for themselves. That's why the shift has to start internally before it ever shows up in communication. If you're still attached to their response, still hoping they'll finally say, "Wow, you've changed," or "I miss you now," then your energy is still tied to the past dynamic. But when you genuinely release the need for their recognition, you become someone different, someone lighter, someone magnetic, because your focus is no longer on controlling their feelings, it's on honoring your own. People pick up on that. They can feel when you've detached, not in a bitter or guarded way, but in a powerful, peaceful way. They notice when you're no longer seeking closure, when you're no longer emotionally accessible in the way you once were. They feel that you're not waiting for them anymore, and that changes everything. See, what causes someone to come back begging isn't your silence alone. It's what your silence represents. It represents that something inside you shifted, that they no longer have the emotional power they once held, that your life no longer revolves around their decisions, that you've moved from reaction to self-possession. That's what wakes people up. It's not your words, it's the energetic boundary they can't quite name but definitely feel. Think about it. Have you ever seen someone you used to know walk into a room and you just know something is different about them? They don't have to say a word. It's the way they carry themselves, the calm in their eyes, the way they're present but not performing. That's what makes you curious. That's what makes you wonder what changed. That's how real transformation draws people back, not with noise, but with stillness. So when you re-engage after no contact, the most important thing isn't what you say, it's how you say it, the energy underneath your words. The pacing of the conversation, whether you're still chasing or whether you're inviting, whether you're proving or whether you're simply showing up and letting the other person meet you where you are. Let them feel the shift. Let them feel that you're no longer emotionally available to the version of them that hurt you. Let them feel that you're no longer responding to breadcrumbs. Let them feel that your peace is no longer up for negotiation. You don't have to say, "I've changed." They'll feel it in the way you take your time responding, in the way you no longer rush to fill the silence, in the way you're completely okay if the conversation doesn't continue. That energy is the loudest message you'll ever send, and this is the part they won't know how to handle, because they were used to the old you, the you who tolerated the bare minimum, the you who anxiously waited for a reply, the you who kept showing up even when you were met with indifference. So when you come back from no contact with a new energy, it shakes them, it unsettles them, and whether they admit it or not, it forces them to reevaluate everything. Because now they have to work for access. Now they have to meet your standards. Now they have to deal with the version of you who knows what she brings and isn't afraid to walk away if it's not matched. That's what creates the shift in power, not arrogance, not revenge, but quiet confidence. You don't get someone to chase you by telling them to. You do it by stepping into your worth so fully that they feel the loss of your old self, and they realize the new you isn't as easy to access. Let them feel that, because when someone feels the shift, they don't just hear that you've changed. They start questioning whether they even deserve a second chance with the version of you that doesn't need them anymore.